everybody. This is Rob Van Hoff. I'm going to do another sit down with some ancient manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls and medieval manuscript from the 10th century. And we're going to talk about a few verses from this week's Torah portion, which is Parashat Vaera, which begins in Exodus 6. So I have a segment from Exodus 6 that we have that you see on the screen here. And we're going to look at this and talk about the relationship between the old manuscript that you see there on the bottom and the one that is in the background, which is the Washington Pentateuch, which is the 10th century manuscript that we've been comparing with Dead Sea Scrolls. Then, after looking at this verse, we're going to go ahead and jump towards the end of our Torah portion in Exodus 9 at a very small fragment we have. And we're going to compare that as well. And we're going to see a basic contrast here. So we're going to dive right in here. This is Parashat Vaera, and it's from Exodus 6. Now, what we have here is a picture of Exodus 6, starting in the middle of verse 7 on through verse 9. So Exodus 6, 7 through 9. And what we see on the manuscript below is obviously a damaged scroll. And this is taken, you can access these online at the Dead Sea Scrolls website we always are using. But this is from my iPad, so I'm going to be able to make some notes on this. But first, we'll just read it real quick. What we're going to look at from both texts, I'm going to read from the Washington manuscript first, and it cuts in halfway here. It says, "Ki ani Adonai Elohechem, for I am the Lord your God. Hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim, the one who brings you out." We talked about hamotzi before. Here actually we have the whole word, hamotzi. That's a hifil participle from yatsa, yod, tzadi, aleph. Hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim, from under the burdens, or the burdens, I guess, or that's a good word translation as any, of Egypt. And it continues, Veheveti etchem el haaretz asher nasati et yadi lateth ota la'Avraham leYitzchak ulYaakov venatati ota lachem morasha ani Adonai. So this is back here, Veheveti etchem el haaretz asher nasati et yadi. This is where it says, I will bring you into the land. So veheveti etchem, and I will bring you el haaretz, to the land. Asher is which. So we have like a relative clause here. Which land? Haaretz asher nasati et yadi, that I lifted up my hand, latet ota, to give her. Ota is the antecedent of ota here is haaretz. To give it to whom? LaAvraham, leYitzchak, ulYaakov, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. V'natati ota lachem, and I will give it to you. Morasha, that's this word for possession. Then it says, Ani Adonai. Okay, beautiful phrase. Now what I want to do is I want to bring our screenshot here back. I want to compare what we just read with what is on our screen here. And this is from Marubaat. It's called, it's a wadi that is south of, this is not from Qumran. So this is what we would call a Judean desert manuscript, but it's not from Qumran. So not all Judean desert manuscripts are from Qumran. This one's further south, there's a wadi that runs from the hill country of Judea down into the Dead Sea. And there was a cave out there. And this cave had letters and things from the 2nd century. So this is a newer manuscript. This is a newer manuscript than what we've normally been looking at. And if we look here, what we're going to see is what let's do some compare and contrast. At the top of our screen, we can see our section where it says Adonai Elohechem, right? For I am the Lord your God. That's what we're seeing right here. Adonai Elohechem. And then we have Hamotzi Echem Mitachat. And you can see there's a little bit of a tav here that's broken off. Mitachat. And then we probably have the word, the word for burdens here would be here. Sivlot. And then it takes us right down to here. Mitzrayim. And then we have Haveti etchem. I will bring you to the land which El Asher or El Haaretz Asher. And then we have Nasati. So here there's a noon and a samik that are kind of hard to see, but then you can see the rest of it. So it's noon, or not samik, sorry, it's a scene. It's a scene with, now I just added that diacritical dot. So remember, there are no vowel points, and so no diacritical marks here to differentiate a scene from a sheen. So for example, like here's the word B'nai Yisrael. So notice there's no dot here or here to tell us. That's because we're in a place where people, there's a recitation, an oral recitation tradition being preserved by these scribes. Now, the core point here is one thing I love about this manuscript is the message. Nasati et yadi. I have lifted up my hand. That's the Lord saying that he has sworn. Latet ota, to give her, or it, that's referring back to the land. And then we have the names of the patriarchs here. La Avraham, Le Yitzchak. And look at it, isn't this beautiful Hebrew? Notice the hey. You'll notice that the hey of Abraham is still, it seems to be this sort of form, but it's very beautiful Hebrew that we're looking at here. You can tell this scribe was very skilled and took his time. And Le Yitzchak, right? We have Abraham. I'm going to get rid of that circle over Abraham. We don't need that there. Le Yitzchak. And then Yaakov. Yaakov here is obviously missing. And if I start at the back, maybe I can write all the letters. I'm not going to be able to do it exactly like that would be our kuf, because this is our bet. And to spell Jacob backwards, it would be bet, kuf, ayin, yod, and then one of their lameds. Sorry, it's kind of sloppy, but Le Yaakov. So then we would have the three names of the patriarchs to give it to Abraham, to Isaac, and there'd be a and to Jacob. And then it says, right on the heels of that, V'natati ota lachem, and I will give it to you. Same phrase. Morashah, here, if we were to have a vowel point, we'd put it on this side. So the scribe knows that this word here is morashah. If I were to write it in with a sheen. But in the very next line, we see B'nai Yisrael, and this is going to be an S sound rather than a sheen. So we've got these phonemes. These are what we call a phoneme. So in Hebrew, I just realized I was looking at my pad. I need to roll up here. Phoneme, we have two phonemes, but one letter. So the letter looks like this. Sometimes it makes a sh sound. Sometimes it makes a s sound. And how do we know? How did they know? They knew because they knew the language. They knew because they knew the language. If we were to compare, now again, this is from Wadi Murabaat, not from Qumran. This is not the product of Qumran culture or scribal culture. What we have here is a text that matches exactly the later Masoretic text. From just this fragment alone, there is no variance. No variance. The last line here is that it says "Velo shamu," and they did not hear, because Moses. It says "Vaidaber," which we don't see here. Vaidaber. My gracious. If I were to put the little, vowel points on here. Vaidaber. Oops. Dagation Resh. It's kind of ugly, but Vaidaber Moshe Ken. Moses said this to the children of Israel, Velo Shamu. They did not listen to Moses. It would be El Moshe down here. And then it would say, Mikotzel Ruach. Mikotzel Ruach. That's this right here. We have a Mem, Kuf, Tzadi, Resh. Mikotzel Ruach. And that's from their shortened spirit, their broken spirit. U me'avodah kasha, and from their hard slavery or harsh slavery. This fragment matches exactly the Masoretic text. And it also reflects a very carefully planned page layout and a very consistent and what I think is a very lovely Hebrew writing. Okay, now we're just going to shift and go to the end of our Torah portion. And I have to shift to a different screen from the Washington Pentateuch. And this is to Exodus 9. And it is Exodus 9, 27 through 29 is the main verse here. And it's going to be over on this side. And this is where Vayomer Alehem, I'm at the top of the page here. This is where Pharaoh said to them, that is to Moses and Aaron, Chatati hapa'am, I have sinned this time, or this time. Adonai Hatzadik. Adonai Hatzadik. And remember, the Masorah note here of the Lamed means it's the only time this occurs. We have a circle between Adonai and the word Hatzadik. Va'ani ve'ami. That's the only time that occurs. I and my people. Ha-Rishaim are the guilty ones, are in the wrong. Then he says, plead unto Adonai. And he says, I will let you go, etc. And then it says, Vayomer elav Moshe, and Moses said to him. And then we're going to see this word hakolot, which is the thunder. Okay, why am I being so sporadic here? Is because the fragment we're going to investigate is, let me see if I can put this over here, and then I'll bring this up. Okay. Look at how small this fragment is. So I want to get this lined up. Oop, I got to go back up again. Sorry about that. There we go. That's what I was just disoriented there for a sec. There we go. Okay. Now up in the upper left where we saw the Pharaoh says, for Adonai is righteous, or he is in the right. What we see here on this fragment is, oops, let me get my color here. You know what, let me change it to a black color too. This is our word Hatzadik. Hatzadik. So we see here the Yod and the Kof. This is righteous, or in the right, as the ESV says, is righteous. And this is the idea is it's a courtroom situation. You have a tzaddik and you have a resha. And Pharaoh's saying Adonai is the tzaddik, and va'ani, so there's a vav in here, va'ani ve'ami harashaim. And this manuscript has a wide, pretty wide column, because there's a lot of text, and the next time we see the matchup is, this is the word of Elohim. So we've got a hey here, and a yod and a mem, and this is from Elohim, but we don't have the word Elohim spelled out, and I'm suspicious that this manuscript probably spelled Elohim with a vav here. This is the word Elohim from verse 28, and I'm going to scroll down here. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, right here. So Elohim uvarad. So Elohim uvarad. See this? So notice this. We've got a vav. We've got a bet. Kind of looks like that. We've got a resh and a dalet. Notice the only thing that differentiates the resh from the dalet is this little edge right there, for the most part. Without that little nobule, it'd be tough to tell, wouldn't it? But that's not our interest here. So I'm kind of setting this up. Our interest is actually in this next line, and it'll come back to show you why I think there might be a vav here if we saw the original manuscript, even though we don't have that fragment. We don't know for sure. I'm going to go back to black ink. Okay. It's this part right here. Vayomer Moshe. So I'm going to bring it up here. So, and Moses said, so this is 9:29. Exodus 9:29. Now the Masoretic text says, Vayomer elav Moshe. And he said to him, that is Moses. Vayomer elav Moshe. That means Moses said to him. Well, what we have in this fragment, now again, I should clarify to contrast, this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is from Cave 2. This is an Exodus fragment from Cave 2 at Qumran. And it's older than the Wadi Muraba'at manuscript that we looked at. But notice this. Notice this right here. I'm going to scroll over a little bit and write. This is spelling Vav, Yod, Vav. Then we have our Aleph, Mem, Resh. So in Hebrew, I would do this. So the question is, what is that Yod doing there? Oh, I wanted that to be black. Or red, rather. What's that doing there? And the other question then is, there's a word missing here, and the word is elav, which in Hebrew just means to him. So that's missing. That's in the Masoretic text, clearly between Vayomer and Moshe. But elav is missing here. And then finally, let's look at the word Moshe. Let's look at the word Moshe here. It actually is spelled Mem, Vav, Shin, Hey. Now that was me trying to do a little scribble for ancient style. It would be more like this, Moshe. So again, we're in a situation where we have a Vav. So we've got a Vav here and a Vav here. Well, that represents a vocalization that is the same that aligns with what we see in the Masoretic text, the O sound. In the Tanakh that we have above, or in the it's a Pentateuch, we have Vayomer, and there's this little dot, and that little dot is called a holam. A holam, it's the O sound. Well, instead of a holam, if we look back here, there's no vowel points, but so instead of a holam, they write a vav, and that tells the reader Vayomer to make a O sound right here. Long O. Same thing with the word Moshe. Moshe up here has mem, and it has a little dot, is that O sound, and then a sheen. We know it's a sheen because there's a diacritical mark, and then the letter Hey. Moshe. Well, in our manuscript below, we see this, we see this vowel right here. It adds a vav for an O sound. If that were not enough, erase some of this extra stuff here. I've added all this kind of scribble. And we look at this word here, kolot. Kolot. It's the last word we're going to look at. Hakolot, the thunders. That's this right here. Hakolot. So if we go back and we do a black ink, we see here's a Hey, here's a Kuf, here's a Vav, Lamed, Vav, Tav. Well, compare that spelling. That's not a very good Kuf. Hakolot. Notice how it's spelled here in the Masoretic tradition. Hey, Kuf, Cholam, Lamed, Cholam, Vav, Tav. This is the feminine plural. Hakolot. For Hakol is the thunder, thunders. Hakolot. Notice in the Dead Sea Scroll manuscript, it adds this Vav. This letter Vav has been added. It's this one right here. Remember, they made the Vavs different. So zooming back out on our Cave 2 fragment of Exodus 9, we see an added Vav for an O vowel here, Vayomer. We see the missing Elav, or we don't see it. We notice that it's missing. And then we see an added Vav here, and an added Vav here. Boom, boom, boom. 3 added Vavs, where the later Masoretic tradition does not put a letter there, but preserves an O sound. So they're in agreement as the sound it makes, not how it's represented graphically. Now you can see why I have good suspicion that Elohim would be spelled with a vav here. Now, I can't prove it, but we do have other fragments that show that at times Elohim in the Dead Sea Scrolls is spelled with a vav, like that. So, all in all, today what we looked at are two fragments, one from the Dead Sea Scrolls from the time of Yeshua, and that's where we see this variance from the Masoretic tradition. We see, in particular, 3 different vavs that are added that change the number of letters, right? When you add a letter, you are changing the strings of consonants. And this separates this text from what we see in the Masoretic tradition later. These added vavs, however, do not change any meaning. They are functioning for the reader to remind them to make a O sound when they get there, when they get to that word. So this fragment is probably, I would say, 1st century, so time of Yeshua, and it's from Exodus, and it has these added letters, and I'm speculating on the word Elohim, it may or may not, but clearly in this cluster, we see that the convention used by the scribe of this manuscript is to use this vav letter to make the O sound. This contrasts with the Wadi I'll bring that one back up here. It contrasts with this manuscript, which was not found at Qumran, but still Dead Sea Scrolls, right? This is still from the Judean desert, but it's from probably, it might be 2nd century. This could very well be written post temple destruction. And we notice that the letters are exactly the same string of letters, same string of consonants that we find hundreds of years later in the Tiberian manuscript tradition, like we see here with our Washington Pentateuch, which is in the background. So what does that mean? That means in the early, the 1st and 2nd century, there are more than one stream of scribal tradition. And even, so this is separate. Like we've looked in the weeks past, we've looked at how letters were formed, and we see how the different scribes write differently. Just like if I were to write a letter and you were to write a letter and we compared our handwriting, we could say, oh, they're both writing in English, but it's clearly a different person. Well, that's no different back here. But there's another thing too, this how words are spelled is different. And as we saw, there is variance in the Qumran text, like the missing elav, for example, the added letters to help pronunciation, which indicate a different community world, and maybe less strict than the manuscript or the scribe manuscript tradition that is represented in Wadi Muraba'at here that we're looking at. And so when scholars study the Hebrew Bible, what do we look at? Do we go and look at what the printing press, what the printers did in the 15th and 16th century? Do we go back to the 10th century and look at our best manuscripts like we're seeing here with the Washington Pentateuch? Again, this is at the Museum of the Bible, so you're it's really wonderful. You can go there. All these manuscripts you can go online and look at yourself. Or do we go back to our Dead Sea Scrolls and try to see, well, what was there? Well, we have to take all this information together and learn how to think about it. Learn how to differentiate scribal tradition from scribal tradition, style of writing from what we call paleography, this way of writing an aleph, for example, and that way of writing an aleph. We take geographical location into consideration. Was this found at Qumran, up north at the Dead Sea, or at Wadi Muraba'at, which is further south towards En Gedi, from a different time period? So all these things help us create a profile to grow in our ability to differentiate and to understand the story of how we got our Bible. So I hope that was fun, and I tried to go quicker than last week, and I changed my mic. Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that note on the mic. So I hope everybody has a great Shabbat, and